This is the narrated presentation for Lesson 6. Lesson 6 includes three different kinds of prefixes, as we'll see. One is the definite article. Another is some of the prepositions. And another is the conjunction. Consider this text, with which you may already be becoming familiar. Go ahead and pause while you read it out loud, and then come back and read it with me. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. What do you suspect about the highlighted form, knowing that this is the beginning of the Hebrew Bible? You've probably heard it translated, "in the beginning." Bereshit bara Elohim. Elohim is probably something you know. In the beginning, God created et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. You probably know that you'll want to translate this as the heavens and the earth. The vav there, ve'et, et hashamayim ve'et haaretz, the heavens and the earth. So we find that the word the is prefixed hashamayim, haaretz. The word in, as in the beginning, is also a prefix, bereshit, bereshit. And that the conjunction is prefixed. God created et hashamayim, the heavens, ve'et haaretz, and the earth. Observe the following. We know a word for a king, melech, and a word for a prophet, navi. The king, hamelech. The prophet, hanavi. So we see that hey, followed by patak, followed by doubling of the following consonant, can be the definite article, the. Hamelech, hanavi. What do you think might happen when we try to supply the definite article to ish, man, or ir, city, or rosh, head? We would like to do ha-ish with doubling of the aleph, but that's not allowed because we cannot double the guttural. Gutturals cannot take a dagesh. Therefore, we have compensatory lengthening of the preceding short vowel. The patak becomes kametz, ha-ish, the man. Similarly, ha'ir, the city, ha-rosh, the head. Compensatory lengthening of what is normally the patak of the definite article. No problem there. What about these forms, though? Palace, heichal, new moon, chodesh, ha-heichal, the palace, ha-chodesh, the new moon. No doubling, of course, because of the gutturals, and no compensatory lengthening. Another example of virtual doubling. Finally, there's a collection of nouns that could be we could isolate what these are, and if you look in your grammar, you'll see a rigorous explanation of where we see this. But just note, for example, that these are gutturals with commas. with a noun hamon, uproar, a noun avon, iniquity, and a noun chazon, vision. When we supply the definite article, he hamon, he avon, he chazon, the definite article takes a segel. Again, the grammar will give you the full explanation of when you may see this. For your purposes, just as a sort of a rough and ready thumb rule, when you see hey segel before a guttural with a comet, ha or ah or ha, plan on that being the definite article. The only possible exceptions are going to come up much later in the grammar in a specific verbal form, and you won't really need to worry about being able to distinguish the two because of other things that are going on. So when you see, for our purposes now, when you see hey segel followed by one of these by a guttural, especially a guttural with comets, expect it to be the definite article, and you'll usually see in quick order that makes the most sense. These are the full rules for that. You may pause and investigate this more closely if you wish. Bereshit, again, means in the beginning, or in a beginning, or in the beginning of something. It's a little complicated. It's the first word in the Hebrew Bible, and people are still arguing about what in the world it means. But the b is clear. It means in. So, be'ir, in a city. Bevayit, in a house. So, for example, in this text from Jeremiah, Kol barama nishma. Kol barama nishma. A voice, a kol, in Ramah, barama, is heard. Nishma means is heard. Or, yesh navi b'Yisrael means there is a prophet in Yisrael. What about the preposition lamed? Le'ir, to a city. Compared to ba'ir, in a city. Le'ir, to a city. Levayit, to a house. Compared to bevayit, in a house. Levayit, to a house. So, for example, Isaiah 5, verse 20 includes a phrase, Choshek le'ur, ve'ur le'choshech. Choshech is a noun that means darkness. Ur is a noun that means light. So this has something to do with turning darkness to light and turning light to darkness. Choshek le'ur, ve'ur le'choshech. And finally, a third preposition, k. We've already had b and l, and now k. K'ir, like a city. Again, compared to ba'ir, in a city, le'ir, to a city, k'ir, like a city. K'vayit, like a house. Compared to bevayit, in a house, levayit, to a house, and now k'vayit, like a house. Go ahead and read this, pause and read this out loud, then come back and read it with me. You can never have too much practice at this stage in your studies at simply looking at a text and reading it out loud, regardless of what it may mean. So pause. Heharim rakadu ke'elim. Heharim rakadu ke'elim. Heharim, well, take off the im ending, And the he is a definite article. Leaves you with har, which is a noun you may know that means mountain. Heharim, the mountains. Rakadu is a verb you don't know. The mountains skip. K, elim. Well, elim is a form that you know. Take off the im ending. What do you think the noun of elim, the singular form of elim, is going to be? Not ale, but ayil. Ayil. Remember in nouns like zayit and zayin and ayil that the ay goes to a in the suffixed forms. Ayil, ram. Elim, rams. Ka'elim, like rams. What about prepositions with definite nouns? So far we've only seen like a house, in a city, like a house, and so on. Those were all indefinite nouns. But as we've seen at the beginning of this lesson, Hebrew also has definite nouns, like Hamelech, the king. So what will happen when we put the prefix, for example, le, when we prefix that to a definite noun like Hamelech, the king? You might expect le Hamelech, le Hamelech. But in fact, the lamed is going to contract with the hey so that you get the form lamelech. Let's go back and look at that definite form again. Hamelech. And you can see that when we put a prefixed preposition like le onto it, the schwa is going to drop out. The lamed is simply going to replace the hey of the definite article, leaving everything else alone. The patak remains, the doubling at the beginning of the noun remains. For the king, lamelech. Do you remember how we said for or to a king? Le melech, with a shva and no doubling. For a king, le melech. For the king, lamelech. You'll remember the definite forms. Ha'ir, the city. Habayit, the house. Ha'hechal, the palace. With a preposition, ba'ir, in the city. Labayit, to the house. Kahechal, like the palace. In these definite forms, even though the prefixed preposition, b, l, or k, replace the hey of the definite article, remember that you can see the other parts of the definite article, the patak and the doubling, or in the case of ir with its compensatory lengthening, the comets, still remain. Those aspects of the definite article still remain, sort of like somebody who's standing behind a curtain, but you can look down and see their shoes underneath it, and you know that they're still standing there, even though the curtain has mostly covered them up. So it is with the definite article in these forms. In a city, ba'ir. In the city, ba'ir. To a house, levayit. To the house, labayit. Like a palace, kheichal. Like the palace, kaheichal. I'm going to pause here and stop this side, and we will begin the second part of this lesson looking at a phenomenon that happens when we prefix these prepositions, b, k, l, with their vocal schwa underneath them. When we prefix them to forms that already begin with a vocal schwa, like gevul. So this is where we will begin lesson 6, part B.